Welcome to Viewpoints with Brenda. I'm your host, Brenda Ntambirwechi, and on this podcast, you'll hear plenty of conversations with African professionals, change makers, innovators, influencers, and entrepreneurs from all sectors. My guest today is David Mpanga, a leading Ugandan lawyer, writer, and public thinker. He's a founding partner of AF Mpanga Advocates, one of Uganda's top law firms, and also serves as Minister for Lands and Properties in the Buganda Kingdom. David is also the author of The Politics of Common Sense, where he reflects on law, politics, and the challenges of leadership in Africa. Welcome back to Viewpoints, David.
Thank you very much for having me, Brenda. I'm really happy to hear that you're back in this podcast. Your main career was taking you away. I don't know whether you introduce yourself as a leading lawyer, now even recognized as a rising star amongst the Irish legal professionals. Congratulations.
Thank you so much. Obviously, you know how hard I worked for it.
Yes. Very familiar with your game, to use a colloquialism. Very familiar with your game.
Yeah, it's been obviously a big change for me moving to Ireland. I think when we last spoke, I was in Kuwait, and obviously after my dad passed, I just needed a bit of a change. So this seemed an ideal location. So I thought it would be nice for us as two friends to just have an honest conversation on grief. In 2023, we both lost very important people in our lives. In your case, your mom, Mama Joyce Masembe Mpanga. And in my case, my dad,
Correct.
Professor John. And I'm really sorry for your loss, David. I know how close you are to your mom.
Thank you very much. And I'm sorry for your loss as well. It was not very far.
Thank you.
I think your dad was sometime in the summer, August, July? April even, and my mother passed in November of 2023, same year. We've been walking a journey not far off from each other.
Very true.
Yes.
But I think yours is somewhat different because you lost your dad, Sandro Frederick Mpanga, in 1976. And I would imagine that kind of early grief stays with you. So when your mom passed, did it bring some of that grief back, memories or sort of feelings that you thought had eased?
It's an interesting question because when my father died, I was only 6 years old. And when you're a child, I think you process things differently. Things become normal quickly, because I think your brain is still growing and you're generally trying to make way through in a world that you're not familiar with. So when my father died, I quickly adapted to the fact that I had only a mother. And I think grief, as I recollect it, only hit me, or missing of my father, only really hit me when I was a teenager, when people at school and my peers had stories about their fathers that get picked up by their dads. Some of these stories would even be bad stories, but I wanted to have a dad story that was, I could be involved in many things, but I couldn't be involved in a story about I did something with my dad, or my dad did something, or my dad is coming. But you get used to that, I think. And when my mother passed, soon after I got the news, funny, my mind went straight back. It's funny how the brain works in these times. To a chance meeting I had with Justice Katurego, and his mother had just passed in the aftermath of his mother passing. He was already a former Attorney General. I think he was then working in Kampala Associated Advocates before he became a Supreme Court judge. So he was a grown man, as far as I could see. He was in his 50s or even 60s. And I condoled with him, said to him I was sorry about his loss. And he sat in a worker's house in the lift lobby. And he said to me, "Do you know you're never too old to lose your mother?" And mother passed, I was 53. I was just on the cusp of 53. It was days before my birthday. And 53 is a big age. So you're a grown man. It's a shock. It really is a shock. You're never old enough. And many people, when they come to commiserate with you, with a parent who is older, my mother was 90, going 91. The initial thing people would say, and I'm now very conscious not to say it, and I warn people not to say, "Oh, she was old." Yes, she was old, but she was my mother. Exactly. She lived a full, yes, but we still wanted her for longer. So it's, I don't know whether I could say that the grief from 1976 came back, but I walked a journey that I hadn't walked in terms of close grief. I'd lost friends, I'd lost contemporaries, relatives, uncles and aunts, but there's a certain way in which you've never lived in a world without your mother, unless you have the misfortune of being one of the children born to parents or mothers who suffer maternal mortality. But you never live in a world without your mother, and your whole life, in many ways, assumes, expects, operates on the premise of your mother being there to give you advice, to appreciate, to be happy. So grief for me was a new thing. I did have the experience of having achievements, say being called to the bar and missing my dad and wishing I could tell him. But I never had the experience of telling my father life milestones in life and successes or failures. Or my mother, on the other hand, I did. In November 23 and after, I then had to really process grief. I hadn't really processed grief before in that sense. And the close proximity made me realize a number of things about life and about myself, most importantly, and about the limitations that, say, society places on us as men in the grieving process, and how the only way out of grief is grieving.
Yeah. And it's funny you say that, because I was just about to ask you about how grief is portrayed in books, in culture, in religion, and if there are any narratives for religious perspective or even cultural ones that you don't agree with just because of your experience with grief. Because I think one for me was there's some sort of shame associated with grief.
I don't know whether it's narratives or expectations, but it's expected that men will be strong, and that strength can actually be the thing that breaks you. If you think about the tree that is weathering a storm, the very strong rooted tree gets blown over, whilst the reed will be blown down and then will stand back up. So in certain things, your strength can be your actual weakness, or even in seismic movement. Stiff buildings get broken down. The buildings that can sway can survive more. So I think that whilst I may not be an advocate for falling on the ground, rolling around and crying and kicking, I'm very much an advocate for when you feel like you're overcome with grief, you must cry. You must cry. You need not do it in public so people watch you do it. But so it's not, to my mind, about presentation of it. But if the feeling is overwhelming and just, you have to cry. It's normal. And over the months, for me, and if I may talk about the stages in a sense, when I was told, and this was something that I realized later, that for a long time, maybe from 1976, I had prepared myself for the day that I'd hear that my mother had died. And it was something maybe that I was trying to do to immunize myself against the shock. But it was still shocking, and more shocking for me because I talked to her in the minutes before I was then told she died. I was called in the middle of the night, very early in the morning. I was in Kigali. Ironically, I'd gone for a funeral. And I wondered why my mother was calling me. My mother's phone, so my mother was calling me at what was 3 a.m., 4 a.m. Uganda time. Her nurse caretaker said, "Oh, do you want to speak to mom?" So I was like, why would I want to speak to mom now? So when she came on, she was a normal voice, was just saying, it wasn't you that I wanted to speak to. I wanted to speak to Lydia, my sister, who's a doctor. Because I've got a very strange pain. I've been uncomfortable. I'm unable to sleep. So I said, look, let me just jump off and try and get Lydia rather than interrogate, because as she said jokingly, you're a lawyer. You're not the doctor. I don't need a lawyer, doctor. Tried to get Lydia. Lydia wasn't available. I tried to get her husband, had spent the night at their farm. I then thought quickly to call my cousin Nandi, who's a doctor. And Nandi just said, look, let me drive there. But then just as I was doing that round of quick calls, my mother's driver called me. Now, when my mother's driver called me, I thought, because he lived in the compound, in our home, but not in the house. If NASA is in the house now, this is really an emergency. It's not, I'm just feeling a little unwell and what should I do? So NASA just said, look, let's not wait for the doctor. I'm going to take her to the hospital. And I said, NASA, that's a very good idea. So he didn't even hang up. I just heard him give him instructions. Said, get a dressing gown on, let's go. So I'm like, okay, they're heading to the hospital. So I called up Nandi. I said, Nandi, They're actually heading to the hospital. Go and meet them there. I called somebody else at the hospital who I know to be in the management of the hospital to say my mother's on her way to your hospital. Kindly alert someone so that Ugandan things, you need to know someone. It helps. So then I'm awake. It's 3 a.m. where I am, and I'm just staring at my phone. I can't just say, all right, I've sorted that out. Let me put my head back down. So I'm standing up. I'm thinking what's going to happen. And then, to cut the long story short, my mother's driver calls me, says, we've arrived at the hospital. And I'm like, great. About 20 minutes later. And then he says, none of the doctors we know are here. So I said, don't worry. The people that you find there will be doctors. They know what to do. And he said, they don't seem to know what to do because they're just pressing her chest. Now, for him, it was weird. For me, my mind immediately went to, this is CPR. So I said, don't worry, just step away. Just step away. They know what they're doing. Then I hung up. Then I tried to call my cousin Nandi. Nandi was probably driving, so she wasn't picking. So NASA calls me back. A matter of minutes, but these feel like eternity at that stage. So NASA calls me back. And when he did, he couldn't talk. I could just hear him struggling for breath. Like going, just trying to talk, to compose himself to talk. So I knew this was now bad news. And I decided in my mind that I wasn't going to hear from him. So I hung up. So I hung up and I said, no, it's bad news, but let me know. So I just hung up and I waited for what was going to be another call that was going to tell me. I think I called my wife, I called a number of people to say, look, this is going on. Then, in a matter of minutes, Nandi had arrived. Nandi called me. I picked up Nandi's call, and Nandi, in the calm doctor's voice, said to me, I'm here. And in Ruganda, euphemistically said, but Mama is not here. So I realized that she'd gone. And then it's mechanical. You're thinking, how do I get back to Kampala? Who do I need to tell? So I'm not going to tell that whole story. I'm not yet in grief. I'm in shock, I think is the right word. But in shock, you're doing the things that you need to do to get back. So I've managed to get a change to my ticket, lift to the airport, the early morning flight. I get through to the gate. I'm like 4 hours early or 3 hours early. But I literally want to sit at the gate as if that will mean that I'll go sooner. And I'm listening, in communication with people on the ground. And then they tell me, eventually my sister gets to the hospital, everybody's at the hospital. Then they tell me, before I set off from Kigali, that the funeral services people they've taken the body. They've taken her away. So then now it hits me at a second level. My mother is dead. She's not in the hospital. I'm not running to get to the flight to get to the hospital. Actually, she's been taken away from the hospital, and not by Lydia or somebody's picked her up. It's A+. Funeral services have taken her away. So you're thinking, okay, my mother is dead. But again, you get some waves of like sadness, but it's still shock. Then through the days of vigil, people coming, saying, hello, you feel sadness. It's the sadness of arriving home when she's not there, seeing people for the first time, your sisters, brothers, friends of your mom, whoever, neighbors, people commiserating with you. She's lived a full life and all those things. And that's our tradition. It's good because it helps you process. I think you talk about the incident, you're doing what essentially is like therapy. So you talk, people talk to you, people tell you about their own grief experiences, but there's a lot of organization and things going on. There's a meeting to organize this, funeral arrangements and things. So for me, the real breakdown and feeling of grief was in the service, I think, in Namirembe. I remember saying that it's interesting, but when we go to funeral services of friends, parents, anybody that's connected, and socially, it's a good thing to go. But whilst you're there, you're thinking, I have an engagement with Brenda at 6 o'clock. It's 4:30, we're still running within time. You might text Brenda and say, Brenda, how are you standing for 6? Then Brenda might say, oh, I've got another meeting at 6:30. If you can't make it for 6, let's do the call tomorrow. And you say, all right, yes, that's fine. Then you switch off and get back in. You're there, but you're not in it. like for my mother's funeral, I was in it. It was me. Everybody else had come and was going to go away. And I was in it. My mother was not going to come back. My mother was dead and I was in it. I had this burden, which I was carrying everywhere with me. Others were coming, carrying it, holding it a little bit for me, lightening the load, but they were going to go. Of course, the whole burial process as well, you feel it deeper when you see somebody who's getting the casket lowered in the grave. But it really hit me when I got home after that. And I went to the bathroom and I just collapsed and just like really cried. As opposed to weeping or losing it, being a bit emotional. And then trying to cope with it, which you asked about narratives and expectations. A lot of the pushing, many people were like, take your time. And I didn't want to take my time. I wanted to be back in and I wanted to be treated as normal. So people would see you and would say, I'm sorry about your loss. And it would like spark a trigger, depending on who said it and how they said it, when they said it. You might find yourself tearing up a little bit. But you want to get back in and you want to carry on as if nothing had happened. But it's actually foolish to do that. You need to take time. You actually need to take time. Because for me then, the series of firsts, it was my birthday within days of my mother's funeral. It was just before Christmas. It was our first Christmas. Our mom. And New Year's, you have that whole thing. Then suddenly you have, my mother's birthday was in January. And I think for me, my mother's birthday, 22nd of January, was like the day I first said out loud that my mother died. And it was like I was really hit with grief. I was really badly. It really hit me in January. The permanency of it, the things which you just think, I want to talk to my mom about this. I want to tell her this happened. My kid did well in something. I want to tell her. I want to go visit. I've just left work. I want to stop for tea and then go home. So that really, then you find yourself with temper issues. You find yourself maybe wanting to withdraw from society until eventually some friends, and good friends, supportive friends, said to me, Dawood, you need therapy. And again, in a man's world, therapy sounds soft. You can't handle these things. And in our society, sometimes therapy is associated with mental health. Mental health is associated with madness. It's like you're losing it. Why can't I deal with this thing? So I initially resisted therapy. And the interesting thing was a close person very close to me nominated me to be one of, a person who helps them walk a recovery journey. This person was struggling with dependency and dependence on substances or substance and was told they needed people that they could be honest with and who could encourage them. It's like psychosocial support. Doing that, I met with one of Uganda's leading clinical psychologists, whom I talked to very openly and in depth about my friend's situation and how I can help. And in doing so, I became very friendly with her. And I suddenly realized that all the things I was saying to help somebody else, I needed in a different way. And the things that she was saying and how she was talking about what they do with therapy and everything didn't sound scary or stigmatizing at all. In fact, for me, the other thing was I was worried about it might also now create a dependency in me. I'll need to talk to somebody all the time. So then when I eventually decided that I must do this, I was brave enough to ask her, and I said, look, if I needed to talk to somebody that's not you, because I now know you in a way that I don't think I can be comfortable now being with you as my clinical psychologist, but is there somebody that you recommend? And she did recommend a very good clinical psychologist. And Dr. had in about between 6 and 10 sessions weekly really helped me walk and rationalize my grief. And I think the major thing that I learned from her and from that experience was what people had been saying about taking time. But it wasn't just taking time, it was also understanding what's happening in that time. And you and I are probably people who like to understand things. When you buy something, you read the manual, you try to understand how it works, you go online, read the reviews. When grief happens, where do you go to get the manual? Things because you're struggling and saying, I want to recover. But in order to recover, you must know what you're suffering from. You must know what is wrong. And there are things that can be impediments to that process. Denial is one big one. So let me bury it underneath work. And I'll only think about it once a day or not at all even. So I'll just fill it up with work. I'll throw myself into other people's problems. I will drink or I'll take a pill, which will make me feel better. That denial can actually be the worst thing. Then once you admit it and getting to understand what it is that you're faced with, the knowledge that it does change. How does it change? The days when you're feeling much, much better, not because you've forgotten the person, but you're just feeling better. Then it'll be a very small thing, a tiny little thing. I was in a meeting talking about secondary schools, and there was a lady who was articulating something about the difference between founders and founding bodies and founding institutions. There was something anyway about secondary schools and boards of governance in secondary schools. And I just looked at this lady and I thought my mother knew a lot about education. And I just burst into tears. In the middle of the meeting, to my great embarrassment, tears. I was fine. There was absolutely nothing that day to tell me or to make me think that today was going to be a grief day. And from Dr. Opondo, I learned there's that, I can't remember who said it, but it's grief is love which has nowhere to go. You don't stop loving the person. You love that person, but before that love took you to visit them, you bought something for them, you could talk to them on the phone, you could write them a letter, you could express your love to them and express their love back. They'll send you something, they'd call you. Now you're sending it and it's not going anywhere. So it comes back and it makes you miserable.
Yeah.
And you never get used to it. In the sense in the sense that you don't, how can I put it? You can't get over, I think that's the right word. You never get over loss. You learn to live with it. And you get a new normal. You get a different normal. And that different normal takes a while to get into, because you've also, depending on how long or whatever, as my friend Bishop Zach said, you've lived with your mother all your life. You're 53, you've never lived in the world without your mother. You don't know whether it's driving through a particular neighborhood that will make it so, because you've never seen Katwe in a world that doesn't have your mother in it. It might be something you want to talk about. In Katwe, you've never had a Christmas, you've never had a birthday, you've never had a child's birthday, you've never you've never had a failure. It's love. And that love had so many aspects and so many modes of expression. And it's now in you and you can't put it anywhere. And it makes you sad. That's why you're sad. So the expectation that you should be strong, bold, that's what actually can break you. You must grieve. And the grieving, it was the particular who told me that when I was asking for a day off on the 23rd, I was supposed to be helping officiate some function in Brenda. And I broke down the night before, which would have been on my mom's birthday, would have gone out for dinner. So I worked a full day. And as I was walking out the building, about 7 or 8 o'clock, I just thought it's funny no one's called me to tell me where we're meeting for mom's birthday. I realized my mom is dead. And I said it out loud. And that just broke me to bits. And the next morning, thinking I'll be all right, I put my feet on the ground out of my bed. And I just remembered what had happened, essentially. And so when I called him to say, look, I could have said I'm feeling fluey, but I just said, let me say it. I just said, look, I'm really overcome with grief. I don't know why. I know why. It was my mother's birthday yesterday. And he said, look, it's not even 2 months. It's not even 2 months. The only way out of grief, is to grieve. You must grieve. Don't feel like you must put on this strong macho suit of armor because it will break you.
Dad passed. So I think my biggest struggle was forgetting the last 5 days of his life compared to the 66, 67 odd years that I had known, that he had been alive, or like maybe the 42 that I had known him. So I think with me as well, therapy helped a lot in terms of just trying to rationalize, because at some point I honestly felt like I was running mad. And I think, going into all these grief forums and seeing that people were facing the exact same feelings. And these were people who had maybe lost their parents years and years ago. So I was like, okay, so this is perfectly normal. Whatever I'm feeling is perfectly normal. But therapy also helped me. There was a point where you would think there's insanity around the corner because you're wondering, am I supposed to be thinking about this person all the time? Is this a normal feeling?
It's strange that you don't realize how frequently you interact with them within yourself.
Yeah.
In your thoughts and in actual interaction. That as I drive through a certain place, I'll think about something, I'll go to call someone. You interact with them, your loving relationship with them is alive and interactive, internally and externally to them, and vice versa, them to you. So they'll surprise you with a call. They'll send you a text. If they were in the texting kind of, they'll talk to somebody about you, who will then say, oh, we met your mom yesterday and your mom said X, Y, Z about it. You, when they pass, you suddenly are made to realize just how often your brain interacted with, your spirit interacted with your mom. Quite how often you called upon her or sought her opinion, advice, her just encouragement on any issue, whether it be at work, it be at how you want to discuss politics, Trump, whatever, and get your mother's viewpoints. And so comparing it as you did to insanity, yes, I also said it was like a mental illness. Because for me, I never realized that you could have such an unpredictable situation where you're fine 1 minute and then suddenly you're overwhelmed the next. And you don't know, does this thing take a week to heal? Does it take 3 weeks to heal? And that thing, it just takes the time it takes. And there'll be days, even now, when I'll just tear up over something. Not the deep kind of grief that I was in January that time, but there'll be times when I'll tear up about something. Because there's love. You can't say you've stopped loving this person because they died and they died a long time ago. You love them. And your love for them will make you sad.
Yeah. Have you found like contradictions, like while you were grieving, like of course sometimes something big really happens to you, but then at the same time, you're still sad.
Yes.
How have you been handling those moments, those small moments of joy?
The small moments of joy with the help of Hattie, because the instinct is to try and block it and just say, look, let me try and enjoy this. But then you have neither. I've come to accept it for me now. It's not like I cry all the time, but that emotion is actually not a bad thing.
Yeah.
It makes me feel better. So if in the middle of, and this happened in August, my daughter's graduation, and they call her name.
Yeah.
And she got a first class like you. And I want to tell my mother, but it's knowledge that would have been happy.
Yeah.
And the acknowledgement that, that grief is my love for her. I love her. And it's not a shameful thing, nor is it a bad thing. In the happiness, joy to feel sadness. Because in that happiness, you are sharing with somebody, just that they're physically there with you.
I agree. It's always so sneaky and how unexpected these feelings just come and attack. I'd say attack because it really feels like an attack when this grief overwhelms you, when you have these small triggers. Someone told me after he passed that you'll start seeing small manifestations of him present. And my dad loved the hymn, Blessed Assurance. Every time it comes on, my phone's always on shuffle music. So every time it comes on, I'm like, this man is thinking about me somewhere.
Yes. And I mean, on a deeper level, and it's important that people also understand the spiritual and metaphysical aspects of grief. I was not angered, but I was a little unhappy with the church and the people that, because in that immediate period, there are a lot of prayers and at home, church, and the sermons tend to go, don't be angry at God, etc., etc. They don't generally prepare you, I think, and I told the bishop when I met him that you need to train the clergy to also not just target souls to say, now get saved in order that you may go to heaven. You need to help people process grief. Bishop Zach, retired, really helped me on the spiritual side of dealing with grief after the event on a one-on-one discussion. But I never felt that the sermons that I heard, and I heard many during that time, really dealt with grief. I think most of them were dealing with preparing ourselves for the afterlife and that kind of thing. But many people who suffer grief, self included, will suddenly realize that certain small things, like you said, show you that the person that you love loves you back. And I encourage people to open their eyes and keep their ears open. Because for me, when I had those attacks of grief, there were certain people who called.
Yeah.
There were certain people who, and many times I do it on my own, or I'm on my own, or I've just come home to be on my own. I've left the public arena, so I just sit somewhere in my house to try and process things and listen to some music and read a book, or something, just to try and compose myself. And 8 times out of 10, 2 people called me on that day or in that moment. Certain people called me. I realized that my mother's spirit somehow uses these people to reach out to me and tell me that it's all right, it's good. The other day I saw a podcast, Diary of a CEO, about a lady who's a clinical psychologist herself, and is a medical practitioner who, having lost her husband, discovered that she could see signs that there was communication from beyond. Now, different people will take this differently, but grief can have an effect that makes you want to see signs. But my advice would be, open your eyes and keep your ears open. You will be surprised. You will see. And it might initially make you more sad, but eventually it will come. It's comforting, at least it is to me. In many ways, I have seen that my mother is well and also wishes me well.
Yeah, I can totally relate to that. I think it's been one of maybe the most unnerving things post-grief. There's something you mentioned earlier about the church services and all that. I think personally, one of the most traumatic things for me was for him 1 minute to be alive, and in the next moment, you're already in funeral preparations. It took me so long to get over that whole thing, because when my dad passed, obviously my mom was beside herself, with the 2 of us in the room. At a certain point, I realized he had gone, but she hadn't. Then I left the room and was outside with my sister and some of her friends. The doctor comes out and tells you. As soon as it happens, they're like, oh, by the way, after they give you 5 to 10 or however enough minutes, they'll come and say, by the way, our funeral partner is.
So
immediately. I feel like the whole funeral thing is very traumatizing. The admin around it, I think, was unexpected. I had no clue how much goes into planning a funeral. For me, that was traumatizing. It added onto the grief.
Which is why our tradition, which generally has many people pile in and do some of these things for you, is actually a good thing.
It is.
Because the bureaucracy of it, the dehumanization of a person whom you were with a minute ago and whom you're still processing their absence. I think it's a good thing in our culture that we have people who come around to help.
Absolutely.
To the extent that I've been told someone's lost their close one and they're still at the hospital and I'm close by, I always rush there in order to help with those kind of things. As you do them, this person can just process the fact that they've lost someone, as opposed to losing someone then being told, sign here. Going to, many people have been traumatized. Going there and seeing somebody you love there, it's very traumatic. If it's to be avoided, you must avoid it.
Yeah. I also think that kindness, as you were saying, of people like during the fact, like it makes such a big difference having so many people around you and so many people supporting. For us, it was nice, especially when you finished. It's all been done and said, you're buried.
Yes.
And then now you're heading back into town, let's say from the village. And we were so touched. We found that my auntie Irene Kwesiga, she'd cooked a whole meal for us. And like a couple of other people had gathered just randomly, because of course we were expecting to come back to an empty house and just on with their lives, and we're sitting here with grief. But I thought it was just nice to have people just be so thoughtful in that time. It made such a big difference.
That is really the goal in our culture, which we mustn't lose. Because as we were talking about therapy, it's therapy in and of itself. It's sitting with people and you're talking about it, but even sitting with people in the silence of it. In eating, somebody who encouraged you to eat a little bit more, and you realize maybe for 4 days you haven't eaten. If you've had a person who's been ill, like your father died after a long illness, being at the hospital or outside ICU for so many days, then you'll be in the funeral process for so many days, you will have eaten, adrenaline, stress, all sorts of things. The people who help you to carry that load really lighten the burden, and not just lighten the burden, but they help you cope, in my view, and enable you to reason and accept the situation, because a lot of the healing starts with just the understanding and acceptance of the situation.
Do you find that there's things about you that have changed since November 2023?
Yes, it took me a while to get joy back, real joy. You never imagine you will never laugh again or whatever. Of course you will laugh again and everything, but real joy, the things that you do with joy, so you do out of joy and pleasure. I found that I had to really work hard to get back into my regular exercise routine. I'm a hobbyist DJ. I had stopped playing for quite some time, not because I didn't feel like I could play, but because I didn't feel the urge to go and play. And you also feel as you get better that there's certain things now that there's a different perspective. So on the professional side of things, I remember talking to the general counsel of some large multinational. It was being a little bit rude, to be very honest. And I stood up to him, not because of anything, but I lost my mother.
Yeah.
Using this account is what? It's nothing. I'm not going to let this guy talk to you like this.
Yeah.
If you can take it, because if my mother died and I didn't die, what's this account walking out? And I told him off. And funny, because it was like the head honcho in the States, the region, his subordinate in the chain of command was closer. Called me up immediately after the call, very apologetic, saying I'm really sorry about things. And I then said, look, I'm also sorry perhaps if I was sharp. So there's certain things where you find that you change, your perspective changes, your expectations change. But on the good side, I think I was massively touched by the number of people who came, and like you're talking about your auntie doing, the things that people do for people during grief, for the bereaved. And you look and you think, this guy, I've met this guy twice in a meeting somewhere. This guy is here. He's come today. He came yesterday. We've gone out of town for the burial, and they're here. It's that kind of thing that makes you appreciate human nature and also try to be the best in yourself when you hear people's bereavement, to go out of your way to help people.
I think I became a bit more withdrawn in the first months leading up to, but I think for me, maybe the biggest impact was the socials, because I just get on there and feel like these are very insignificant things. My dad has just died and I have failed to get back into it. Also, my dad passing was, I think I've become a bit more appreciative of life and life in general. So I'll take time and enjoy my surroundings as opposed to being hooked to my phone. I look back sometimes and I'm like, how was I spending so much time on these things? Because now I actually have proper phone-free days. You won't catch me on a Saturday, for instance. And I'll take a walk over here in my neighborhood, or I don't know, do something, see my friend, something. But I'll just be a bit more intentional about life and experiencing it, because the thought that it could just be snatched at any moment is it was a bit of a reality check for me.
Correct. And better understanding. I mean, I'm in my mid-50s, and therefore you might think this is just all about wisdom, but maybe wisdom also comes with knocks that we make about the point you make about enjoying the moment. You suddenly realize that there's no where they'll say this is a happy week and you're happy. Something happens, then you have a normal work issue, then you have some emergency to sort out, then you come back to this good thing that happened and enjoy that a little bit, then go back into something else. There's rent due still, there's this, there's taxes, this. When you think, what's happiness? Actually, happiness is just an amalgamation of, in your memory, all those good little things and the times, the moments that you had to feel joyful and content in amongst everything else. So you appreciate that maybe if what makes me happy is drinking this cup of coffee with this donut or this croissant, and I'm reading the newspapers, I have to enjoy myself in that moment. And when I get it in the day, I'm happy because that's my happiness for that day, the beginning of my happiness. Then also in that moment, I must be happy. Because with the new instruction, there's still this deadline that is looming and is causing me grief. And there's still all sorts of, and there's some news that you're going to hear. If you say, no, let me pause this, first finish this, so that I may be happy. The bad news will come before the... So in the moment, take advantage of that moment and savor it and then move on.
Yeah. Thank you, Daudi. I just have one last question for you. When you think about grief now, how do you feel that shape of grief has stretched or shifted in ways that have surprised you?
I like the use of the word shifted because it does change shape. It shifts around. It moved from being a big rock on my shoulders, including actually literal pain in my shoulders, to being something that I meet. It's like a shadow, and I might see my shadow every so often. And I spotted it a few minutes ago. It's shifted also in the sense that it doesn't occupy my thoughts as much or bring me a feeling of debilitation. I'm able to, with the help that I got and with the time that it's been, function in a way that acknowledges the grief. I'll take a moment to be in that grief in the same way as I would take a moment to be in the joy, but I will not be completely sidelined and laid down for a day.
Yeah.
That's progress through a process, but it's shifted in that sense. It's become lighter.
Yeah.
It lives with me. It's like my shadow. It will never be away. I have grief for my father. I have grief for friends and other people that I lost along the way, but it's not overwhelming. It's something that I have to pause and acknowledge. I have to work through when it comes, and then I'm able to move on.
Thank you so much for sharing with me. I know it's hard. It's something hard to talk about openly. Kudos to you for being brave.
Thank you very much. And thank you for giving me the opportunity. I felt when you got in touch that I must share this. We hear a lot about raising awareness about things that relate to mental health, especially men's mental health, is an important thing that I think I should do in my life. There's so many expectations that we place upon ourselves that are damaging in some way. And I think one of them is definitely around grief, this whole thing of got to be a man. That's what breaks you. And you don't want to be broken.
Funny you say that, because I think people were extremely worried about me, because I was quite open about how I was feeling, and people would say, will she be okay? Mm-hmm. And I think obviously from therapy, I knew that it would shift and reshape itself, but I had to be patient with the grieving.
Yes.
And I had to just let it do its thing.
Yes.
While I learned to embrace this different normal, as you called it earlier.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So thank you. Thank you so much, Daudi. I know talking about it doesn't ever erase the loss, but at least we've given it a place to rest for now. So
thank you very much for having me, Brenda. And I hope your podcast goes from strength to strength.
Yeah, that's what you said about the DJ. Like you didn't have the incentive to even, I think I've been in that spot, people pushing me to kickstart, my sister especially.
I meet several people who tell me, because we did something maybe 5 years ago, I meet many people who tell me that they've listened to that podcast and really enjoyed it.
It's actually, your episode is still my most listened to episode. There's not a week that goes by where I don't see that someone has listened. Yeah, so thank you again, David. Thank you for listening to Viewpoints with Brenda. To keep the conversation going, follow us on Instagram at Viewpoints by BN and follow me on Twitter at Kasabiti. That's KASABIITI. To hear more conversations like this, follow the podcast, subscribe, like, and feel free to leave us a rating. See you next time.